Good morning. Good morning, my dear friends and my dear children. You may see my comment box where we have a lot of requests to have a class on clothes. I remember my father when I was in a standard 8th or 9th perhaps. He told me that people who use clause in sentences must have cultured English language. I remember. And when I have such a request from your side, my dear viewers, today, first of all, we shall go to the foundation of our discussion on clause. Before we go to the main discussion on clause, we must have the basic knowledge. As you know, my dear friends, that I always focus on the fundamentals. And while talking about the clause, first of all, let's know what is the need and necessity of learning clause. When you talk about the question papers, the comprehension questions, the grammar questions from KG1 to PG, you will see there will be a direction, instruction in the question that do as directed. Here we have also two types of clause. Do, principal clause, and as directed is subordinate clause. In our day-to-day life, while talking in English language, we come across different types of clause. While reading the newspaper, while watching the television, while listening to our teachers, and whenever you are listening to me, my dear friends and my dear children, we use clause. That's why it is a must to learn about the clause. Let's start with the fundamentals. So let's go to the first sentence. Birds return to their nest at sunset. This is a sentence. And in this sentence, as you know it very well, my dear friends and my dear children, that birds return to their nest at sunset. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 words are there. We shall start with the word. B-I-R-D-S, bird. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 alphabets or letters are there. When we have one or more than one alphabet and having a complete sense, a meaning, usually this is called a word. Birds, as you know, it has a meaning and 5 alphabets or letters are there. So, bird is a word. The word is an alphabet or group of alphabets having a complete sense. This is called a word. Any doubt? You may put your doubts in the comment box. I assure you that I must reply your questions. And see how 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 words are there. Let's go to the end of the sentence. At sunset. So, at sunset, at and sunset, these two words are combined together to have a single meaning. At sunset. So, when more than one words, they are combined together, they are mixed together and have a sense. Usually we say that this is a phrase. Please don't have any confusion about the phrase. This is a word, bird is a word here, and at sunset is a phrase because we find more than one words when they combine together, join together to have a meaning. My father is in the garden now. In the garden. In the garden. 3 words. In the garden. Okay? Because they produce a single meaning, single sense. So when words gather together, join together to have a complete sense, we say this is a phrase. So think about the word and phrase. Word and phrase. Next, we shall go to the clause. Birds return to their nest. We discussed it. And it was at sunset. at the end of the sentence. But here, when evening came, let's talk about first the similarity between phrase and clause. When you talk about the phrase and clause, what are the similarities? Phrase is also group of words. Clause is also group of words. So what is the difference then? The difference, you see that at sunset, these two words, they are only the group of words. But when you talk about when evening came, no doubt 1, 2, 3, here is also group of words, but you see something difference here. What is the difference? Now, evening is the subject and came is the verb. We don't have any subject and verb in this phrase at sunset, in this group of words at sunset. Got it? So think about the difference. The difference is that a phrase is also a group of words, but without any subject and a finite verb. But when we talk about the clause, a clause must have a subject and a verb of its own. Otherwise, we can never have a clause. After this discussion on word, phrase, and clause, I think you may not have any doubt on the difference between the phrase and clause. Another confusion is there. And questions come to me over phone, and they also send the questions to my WhatsApp and also to the comment box. You may also see there. What is the major difference between a clause and a sentence? We shall talk both the traditional approach as well as the modern approach to English grammar. Traditionally, clause was completely different from sentence. Sentence is something else and clause is something else. But so long as the modern approach is concerned, they say that all sentences are clauses. But we should not underestimate the power of the traditional English grammar. All sentences are clauses, but all clauses are not sentences. Why this Colaveri? Wait for the D. So, when birds returned to their nest, when evening came, that we already discussed it earlier. When we find such a type of sentence, you see that birds return to their nest. This is one part. When evening came, this is another part of the sentence. If someone will be asked to divide the sentence in two classes, usually he or she will put a mark here that birds return to their nest when evening came. And how can you know this? Now, because your birds return subject and verb are there. And here also, evening is the subject, came is the verb. So we can say that these are two different sentences. But as I told you that all sentences may be clauses, but all clauses cannot be sentences. Let's see, after this discussion, you will have no doubt in order to differentiate clause and a sentence. So, birds return to their nest. As you see, this is a part of sentence and it is independent. When I say birds return to their nest, you understand this, that birds return to their nest. Have you any problem? Problems may be given in the comment box. Okay. And when you talk about when evening came, suppose I didn't say anything to you. In my class, I told you when evening came. You will have a doubt. When evening came, what happened? This is incomplete. When independently we use this when evening came, something remained. Kuch to hai. When evening came, sir, you got wet in the rain. When I said this in the class and I went back to my common room, then usually you will follow me. Sir, when evening came, what happened then, sir? So this part of the sentence is incomplete. It has its own subject. It has its own verb. But the sentence has no complete sense or complete meaning. This is a clause, and birds return to their nest. This is another clause. But this can be a sentence when you put a full stop here. Birds return to their nest. But when evening came, independently when you write this and put a full stop, it cannot be a sentence. That's why all sentences are clauses, means independent clauses. But all clauses are not sentences because they don't have the sense. They're senseless. When you talk about the sense, they are senseless. They don't have the complete sense. What meaning shall you get from this sentence when evening came? I think you may not have any doubt on the difference between the sentence and a clause. When you put a full stop here, I repeat. When you put a full stop here, this will be a sentence and this will be an independent sentence, having its own meaning, having its own sense. But when evening came, this part you will independently use here and put a full stop, it cannot be a sentence. So this is a dependent clause. So my dear friends, we may divide the clauses into two classes. As you know, birds return to the nest. It is independent in sense. So we may say that this is called independent clause. And while thinking about this, when evening came, because this has no independent sense, so we can say it is dependent. Because this portion of the sentence, this part of the sentence depends on the main clause to have its own sense or complete sense. And specifically, you may also watch my video on sentences and its type, simple, compound and complex. Very briefly, I can say that a simple sentence is one when there is only one clause. And when you talk about the compound sentence, in a compound sentence you find how independent sentences or simple sentences are joined by the conjunctions and, but, or, like that. And when you talk about the complex sentence, in a complex sentence you find one or more than one dependent clauses. They depend on the main clause to have their own complete sense. So the point of our discussion today is the part of complex sentence, that is the dependent clause. We may have the definition of a clause, that is, a clause is a part of sentence having its own subject and verb. It may be independent sometimes or it may be also dependent sometimes, like this example. So finally, we may sum up our class in 1 or 2 minutes. As we discussed word, a word is an alphabet or group of alphabets having a complete sense, like bird. When we find group of words having its own complete sense, is called a phrase. And clause, when evening came, we have taken an dependent clause, subordinate clause or sub-clause that depends on the main clause to have its own complete sense. And finally, sentence, birds return to the nest, with a full stop. With a full stop, because we can have a full stop when there is a sentence and having its own complete sense independently. So here we do have the full stop, birds return to their nest. This is a sentence. All the clauses cannot be sentences, but all the sentences can be the clauses. So you see, birds return to nest, it is a sentence and also a clause, and this is called the independent clause. This is called the principal clause. This is called the main clause. And here, when evening came, this is a clause, not a sentence. And here, it's the example of a dependent clause that depends on the birds return to the nest, the independent sentence, independent clause. My dear friends, I don't think you will have any doubt on the difference between a word, phrase, clause, and sentence. In the next class, we'll discuss the types of clauses in detail. Take care. Thank you. Meeting in the next class.
Hello everyone. everyone. If you like Pranab sir's classes that you've seen just now, then please do like, comment and share and hit the subscribe button. Thank you.